What if the moments you thought were your weakest were actually the turning points that shaped your life? What if failure wasn't proof that you're broken, but a sign that you're finally standing face to face with the limits of willpower? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at self-control or at your own struggles the same way again. There's an ancient story that captures this perfectly. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus, king of Ithaca, had to sail past the island of the Sirens. Their songs were so irresistible, so enchanting, that no sailor could resist. Ships would crash against the rocks as men leapt to their doom, desperate to get closer to that music. Odysseus knew he couldn't resist them either. He didn't rely on willpower. Instead, he ordered his men to plug their ears with beeswax and tie him tightly to the mast of his ship. He told them no matter how much he begged, no matter how desperately he cried out, they must not release him. And so when the moment came, when the sirens sang and he screamed for freedom, his crew ignored his pleas and his ship sailed safely forward. He became the only mortal to hear the sirens' song and live. This story has lasted for thousands of years, not because it's a beautiful myth, but because it reveals something brutally true about the human condition. Willpower always wavers. No matter how disciplined, strong, or determined we are, there will be moments when desire, temptation, loneliness, or exhaustion overwhelm our reasoning. And in those moments, our lives are not saved by pure inner strength. They are saved by the structures, the systems, and the safeguards we put in place before the temptation comes. But here's the question that brings us here today. What happens when willpower inevitably fails? What happens in those moments when you know better but still slip? When you've sworn you'd never call your ex again, but your hand is already reaching for the phone? When you promised yourself one cookie, but the entire box is gone? When you know you should walk away from that toxic conversation, but you dive in anyway? What happens then? Most people think failure of willpower is proof of weakness. But psychology says otherwise. In fact, what looks like weakness might actually be one of the deepest truths of being human. And if you stay with me, we're going to unpack not just why willpower collapses, but how to build a life that doesn't shatter when it does. Let's start with this. Willpower is not infinite. For decades, psychologists debated whether self-control is like a muscle that tires the more you use it. The term was ego depletion. While modern studies complicate that picture, one thing is clear. Willpower doesn't hold forever. Stress chips away at it. Temptation wears it down. Hunger, fatigue, anxiety. They all eat into the fragile reservoir of self-control we think we have. That's why you can stick to your diet in the morning but binge at midnight. Or hold your tongue all day only to explode at someone you love at night. Willpower is real, but it's fragile. And fragile things break under pressure. If willpower fails, what actually keeps people on track? What separates the ones who crumble from those who keep moving forward? The answer is both humbling and liberating. It's not raw discipline. It's the art of designing your environment. Odysseus didn't trust himself to resist the sirens. He trusted the ropes, the beeswax, the plan. Think about your own life. Maybe your sirens are scrolling endlessly on your phone, texting someone you know is bad for you, or losing hours in front of a screen when you swore you'd work on your goals. Willpower alone won't save you. But what if you tied yourself to the mast? What if you deleted the app, blocked the number, or handed your phone to a friend at night? It feels humiliating at first, right? To admit you don't have endless control. But in reality, it's the most powerful form of wisdom, to say, I'm strong enough to admit how weak I am. But here's where the story goes even deeper. Because sometimes we don't tie ourselves to the mast. We don't block the number. We don't remove the temptation. And we fail. We break the promise to ourselves. And in that shame, in that collapse, many people spiral. They say, "See? I knew it. I'm worthless. I'll never change." And that thought, the shame spiral, becomes even more dangerous than the failure itself. Psychologists say the way we interpret our lapses defines whether they destroy us or transform us. Imagine two people on a diet. Both eat a slice of cake. One says, "I blew it. I'm a failure. What's the point? Might as well eat the whole cake." The other says, I slipped. It's human. One slice doesn't erase all my progress. Tomorrow, I continue. The difference? The first sees willpower failure as identity. I am weak. The second sees it as information. I need a better system. So, let me ask you this. When was the last time you failed yourself? Maybe you broke a promise, gave in to a habit, or let your emotions override your better judgment. How did you respond? Did you let shame define you? Or did you treat yourself like Odysseus, someone who needed a stronger mast for the next voyage? This brings us to a hidden truth about willpower. It's not about never failing. It's about failing forward. It's about recognizing patterns. If you always break your promises at 2 a.m., maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe it's that you're exhausted, alone, and vulnerable to your sirens at that hour. The solution isn't to try harder, it's to change the system. Go to bed earlier. Put the phone in another room. Build in safeguards that protect you when your reasoning is gone. What if the moments of weak willpower aren't the enemy, but the teacher? What if every lapse is showing you exactly where you need more support, more structure, or more healing? Think about it. The person who keeps going back to a toxic ex isn't just weak. They're revealing an unmet need, loneliness, attachment wounds, maybe even unresolved trauma. The person who overeats at night isn't just greedy. They might be starved emotionally, using food as comfort. The person who procrastinates isn't just lazy. They might be terrified of failure, so they avoid starting at all. Every failure of willpower is actually a spotlight, shining on something deeper you've been ignoring. And that changes everything. Because now, instead of saying, "I'm broken," you can ask, "What is this teaching me?" Let's go even further. Modern neuroscience tells us that willpower battles are battles between two parts of the brain. The prefrontal cortex, the rational, future-oriented part, and the limbic system, the emotional, present-focused part. When you're calm, rested, and supported, your prefrontal cortex wins. You make smart decisions. But when you're stressed, tired, or emotional, the limbic system hijacks the wheel. Suddenly, long-term goals fade, and short-term relief becomes irresistible. That's not weakness. That's biology. So how do we work with this biology instead of against it? Here's the secret. You stop fighting the battle in the moment. You fight it beforehand. You tie yourself to the mast before you hear the song. You design your environment, your habits, and your social support in a way that protects you when your rational brain shuts down. That means if you want to stop drinking, you don't keep alcohol in the house. If you want to save money, you set up automatic transfers to savings. If you want to stop texting your ex, you delete the number and block them across every platform. You don't wait for the moment of temptation, you outsmart it in advance. But even deeper than environment is humility. The humility to say, "I can't do this alone." Odysseus wasn't ashamed to tell his sailors to ignore his future pleas. He accepted his weakness as part of his humanity. And maybe that's the step so many of us miss today. We're too proud to admit we need accountability. We think strength means facing temptation head-on. But sometimes, strength means handing the wheel to someone else until the storm passes. What if you stopped seeing willpower as the ultimate test of strength and started seeing humility as the higher power? What if you let your systems, your friends, your environment do the heavy lifting for you? Wouldn't that be freedom? Now, let's land this together. The truth is, your willpower will fail. Mine will too. Everyone's does. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you human. The question is, when it fails, what happens next? Do you spiral into shame? Or do you learn from the slip? Do you double down on pride? Or do you humble yourself to build stronger safeguards? Do you keep pretending you can resist the sirens with sheer discipline? Or do you tie yourself to the mast and let the ship sail you to safety? Because at the end of the day, the most powerful life isn't one without temptation or failure. It's a life designed with such wisdom that when willpower wavers, you still move forward. So now I'll leave you with this. The next time you fail yourself, don't ask, "Why am I so weak?" Ask, "What system did I fail to build? What safeguard did I forget to tie?" And in that moment, you'll discover something extraordinary. Your weakness isn't the end of your story. It's the doorway to a deeper strength you didn't even know you had. And if this message resonated with you, if you've ever struggled with the limits of your own willpower, then take this as your reminder. You're not alone. We're all Odysseus, sailing past our own sirens. The difference is whether we pretend we're invincible or whether we prepare with wisdom. If you found value in this, don't just keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden psychology of everyday life, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Because together we're building not just knowledge, but resilience. Your willpower will waver. That's guaranteed. But your story doesn't end there.